After hundreds of thousands of years of humans following a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, agricultural techniques were developed in what is now known as the Middle East or modern-day Iraq. The invention of agriculture also produced the first great region of the world. This is the story of that region. This is the story of Mesopotamia.
The story of the ancient Mesopotamians goes all the way back to 8000 BCE. Around this time, effects from the Neolithic Revolution were starting to take place. The early agriculturalists were small communities that set up farmland along the Fertile Crescent. These agricultural societies would eventually come to the floodplains of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers around 5000 BCE. These floodplains would later become known as Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers.
What's up? This is Lewis, Professor Lewis, straight out of Compton. Well, you see, the real reason that people started migrating to Mesopotamia was because of the rich soil. Silt collected on the mountains near the Tigris and Euphrates River, and when it rained, the silt would enter the rivers. The silt was beneficial for the growth of crops in Mesopotamia and yielded fertile soil. The floodplains were great because you had a reliable water source and fertile land. Although the land needed irrigation systems to really become useful, so no civilizations really started there until the Sumerians.
The Sumerians were a society that began settling in Mesopotamia in around 4500 BCE during the early Bronze Age. The Sumerians had access to bronze and agriculture, but what really set them off was their distinct pottery that arose in the Ubaid and Uruk periods. These periods set a base for vast intra-regional trade networks that would later become vital to the importance of Mesopotamia.
What's up, people's back? Yes, the Uruk period was fine and all, but what's really important is the dynastic period. The dynastic period began around 300,000 BC, featured quite literally legendary rulers, namely Gilgamesh, the third ruler of the city of Uruk, and he's credited with building the walls of Ur. He tried to civilize many of the savage people. While Gilgamesh was important and all, the real importance lies in the development of the fine writing system cuneiform.
Cuneiform was a writing system developed by the Mesopotamians. It used papyrus and other river reeds to imprint shapes to clay, which was then dried and could be saved as a written document.
Interestingly enough, a slab of cuneiform was recently translated into several bad puns, including one-liners in your first ever Yo Mama joke. The 3,500-year-old joke translated into "Of your mother is by the one who has intercourse with her. Who or what is it?" The punchline might have been lost in the translation, but it's the first recorded poke at humor of one's mother.
Sumerians transported goods by wheeled carts, and donkeys were used as the main beast of burden before camels came about. The Sumerians were skilled metallurgists and could smelt bronze, which they poured into molds to make weapons, such as swords and arrowheads. The potter's wheel allowed mud bricks to be formed and to be used to construct monumental architecture, such as the ziggurat, the religious site for Mesopotamians, and also it allowed the Sumerians to create new pottery that would become popular for trade. This distinct pottery arose in the Ubaid and Uruk periods. These periods set a base for vast intra-regional trade networks that would later become vital to the importance of Mesopotamia.
Mesopotamia's early religion consisted of a polytheistic ideology of more than 2,000 gods that the citizens worshipped to. There were 4 creator gods who were made from forces within a cavern of chaotic water. These are named An, the sky god, Ninhursag, the earth goddess, Enki, god of water and wisdom, and Enlil, the god of storms and wind. This religion dominated the Mesopotamian region until Christianity arose in the 1st century CE. Once the Christian religion sprouted, it spread over the Middle East, including the land between the 2 rivers. Although the polytheistic religion died out for the most part, its stories influenced many biblical tales for the Jews and Christians, such as the creation myth and the Great Flood.
Although the Sumerians were advanced and powerful more so than most civilizations before them, they had a major governmental flaw. The Sumerian kingdom was divided into many city-states, which weakened central government structure and made the Sumerians susceptible to conquest by the Semitic kings of Acadia around 2200 BCE.
However, it is important to realize that cultural syncretism occurred during the conquest. The state became bilingual, and many of the same religious beliefs, such as divine kingship and theocracy, remained. The conquest of Sumeria was due mainly to King Sargon of Acadia. Sargon used his low-class status to gain the support of the common soldiers, and used them to overthrow King Lugal-Sagi-Si. He then proceeded to follow his vision of uniting Mesopotamia under one rulership, conquering land outside of the area as he accomplished this. Sargon's bloodline would continue to rule for at least 2 centuries before collapsing due to increased aridity, which caused food shortage and government weakness.
Yeah, actually, there appears to be a period of anarchy near the end of the Akkadian reign. It would appear that the ancient Akkadian government also had many of the weaknesses that also of the Sumerian government.
The region would be in chaos for the next few centuries until a new king emerged, one with an iron fist, stoic determination, and a universal law code.
Hammurabi, the king of a religious and cultural center known as Babylon, would actually unite Mesopotamia under one leadership. Hammurabi emerged from the chaos near 1800 BCE, determined to reunite the old Akkadian region under himself and the name of the Babylonian Empire. He would use the old Akkadian influences to streamline and legitimize his rule.
Hammurabi saw an excellent opportunity to retake the kingdom. The old territories didn't just disappear. No, they were only decentralized. All he had to do was re-centralize them under his capital of Babylon. You actually see this happening a lot with Mesopotamia during this time. That is, the new kings of Mega made him the current culture to create a completely different culture.
Hammurabi eventually came to rule all of his new kingdom of Babylonia, named after the capital city. Babylon itself would become home to the king and also remain an important cultural and religious center. Hammurabi was also the first king to set a universal law code under himself, which was named Hammurabi's Code.
This meant that when judging crimes, officials would decide based on the inscriptions he set in his giant tablet. There were 282 laws in the code, which dealt with punishments given to offenders of the law. A famous concept from Hammurabi's principles was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, although this varied depending on the social status of the two men in the situation.
The social structure of ancient Mesopotamia was comprised of 3 classes. The first was the free landowning class, which occupied the royal and priest positions, as well as merchants, high-ranking officials, and artisans. Second came the agricultural workers and some artisans who accomplished the bulk of the agricultural work of the civilization. The last group is made up of the slaves, who were employed in the domestic service. Women lost their social status in the cities because of the patriarchal system of agriculture that took place. Women's responsibility was to bear children and raise a family. Men worked outside of the home as either a rural farmer or an urban job, such as a scribe or artisan.
However, no ruling power lasts forever, and Babylon was sacked by the Hittites only a few hundred years after its founding.
Well, the whole amalgamation process is actually happening again here. The Hittites, who actually keep the kingdom's name and just take over leadership.
The precise date for the sacking actually
Hey, the camera's over here. This way.
Many historians will claim it happened as early as 1650 BCE, but others claim the capital lasted until 1500 BCE. It's strange also that there would be an inconsistency in the end of the Bronze Age at this time. Historians just really can't decide as a whole the nature of this period.
By the time the Hittites attacked, Mesopotamia's reign as a major arable land region had ended. You can then start to see cities popping up in Egypt, as well as Mohenjo-Daro in India, and of course there are Chinese cities developing around the Yellow River as well.
Babylon would continue to be controlled by the Hittites for the next 500 years. Then the Kassites would take over and they would last for another few hundred years after that. However, under the Kassite rule, Babylonia was slowly weakening and the Kassite government was easily prone to outside influence. This was more than likely due to the fact that the Kassites were the first non-Semitic rulers and most of their subjects did not have the complete loyalty because of this. From the Kassites, Mesopotamia transferred into the Neo-Hittite Empire, which lasted until 700 BCE. Then control transferred to the Neo-Babylonian period until its conquest by the Achaemenid Empire.
At this point, Mesopotamia isn't really Mesopotamia. Now it's a part of Persia. It was an excellent area for conquest for the Persians, full of arable land, infrastructure, and buildings, and had pre-existing trade connections with Egypt and the like. The beginning of the Achaemenid period would mark the end of Mesopotamia. As it was, the Achaemenids were unlike previous rulers in that they forced conquest without assimilation to their own culture. They later lost Mesopotamia to Alexander the Great during his great conquest. Mesopotamia would continue to be conquered by empires like the Greeks and the Romans. Thus ends our story about the first great agricultural region to exist. This may be the end of Mesopotamia, but only the beginning for the Middle East.